Fortnite is a buggy game, with the majority of its bugs being short-lived and quickly patched. But a select few of these patch bugs and exploits were things beloved by the community, especially competitive players. Bugs that make rotations easier, ones that potentially revolutionize the skill gap, others that equalize the playing field between high ping and low ping players. These are the Fortnite bugs and exploits players didn't want Epic to fix. Movement is one of the most important aspects of Fortnite, and combined with building, accentuates skill expression. But at many points in the game's history, there has been unintended or bugged movement tech that competitive players love to abuse. The first of these is the recently patched EJ Dash. By placing a ramp above your head while simultaneously jumping, the ramp would redirect your momentum forward as opposed to upward. Prior to it being patched, it was actually in the game for a long time. As far back as Ninja Vegas 2018, Myth famously died in a match because of this bug, but it wasn't until mid-2019 when players really learned how to abuse it. In the majority of instances, players just used it to style on opponents, but it did have some practical uses outside of showing off. Because EJ dashing was faster than standard running, players used it in order to speed up rotates and get out of storm faster. However, just as the bug started to gain traction, Epic patched it out with the launch of Chapter 2, and the community was not happy, with many saying the EJ dash increased the skill gap in a healthy way while making storm rotations less frustrating. But this is around the time where Epic stopped communicating with the community, so the frustrations fell on deaf ears. But in December of 2024, with the launch of Chapter 6, Epic revamped Fortnite's movement and unintentionally brought back the EJ Dash. Players were overjoyed with its return, especially now that they were able to combine it with the new Typhoon Blade. But because it was unintentional, Epic vaulted it just a week after, and just like last time, players weren't happy. On many of the threads discussing the EJ Dash, BHopping was also brought up. In Chapter 1 Season 6, players discovered that after using mobility items, if you timed a jump correctly at the moment you landed, you would preserve all of your momentum with the jump and be launched forward. And if you got good at it, you were able to chain consecutive B-hops until jump fatigue kicked in. Many competitive players loved this feature purely for the movement. B-hops allowed you to get more bang for your buck from mobility items, usually allowing you to double the distance you would normally move with impulse grenades. B-hops were also discovered around the time when glider redeploy was in Fortnite, meaning you can infinitely chain B-hops if your timing was good enough. Additionally, B-hops allowed you to correct for poorly timed drops. If you maybe missed your drop by a couple of meters, you could B-hop to close the gap and potentially save your game. Unfortunately, the bug was patched later on in Season 6. While you could still B-hop after gliding, you were no longer able to chain B-hops or B-hop with standard mobility items. Just like EJ dashing, players weren't happy with its removal, saying Epic just kept patching out skillful mechanics in order to decrease the skill gap of the game. Both of these movement exploits were very public during their tenure, but one movement bug that remained a secret for a while was double movement. While many today know about the ability to modify diagonal angles for keyboard movement in the settings, back before this was a feature, there was another method to modify keyboard diagonal movement. In the keybind settings for Fortnite, you have the option to bind two separate inputs for one action. While this is useless most of the time, there was an unintentional bug for movement binds. By putting two separate keys on either move left or right, and pressing both keys simultaneously, the action would be doubled, giving you a deeper movement angle. Initially, pro players kept this under wraps, but it quickly proliferated throughout the community. Due to the difficulty of utilizing this bug to its fullest extent, pros began resorting to means like key remappers, or in the case of Booga, taping two keys together. It is likely that for these reasons Epic patched it out, which angered the competitive community. OG pros like Zate were especially mad since they knew about the bug all the way back in Chapter 1 before Booga and others started using it. This would lead to a 2-year-long fight between Epic and players to get some sort of diagonal movement added to the game. And after years of players using third-party softwares like Wooting and Keys 2X, Epic finally made increased diagonal angles an official setting. So this was a somewhat happy case of a bug becoming a feature. But one bug that wasn't so lucky was quad flying. When the Quadcrashers were first added, players figured out that you could fly across the map with them, since the boost on it also gave you height. However, this was randomly fixed in an undocumented patch sometime in early Chapter 2. It took a while for many to notice, but it still upset the community once it was found out. Upon their return in Chapter 3, the boost mechanics were changed, and while flying was back, it was heavily nerfed. So like and subscribe to pay your respects, no pressure though. At plenty of points in the game's history, bugs and exploits that have had the potential to revolutionize the skill gap present in fighting emerged, and the first of these was the drop reload weapon bug. Sometime around mid-2020, players realized that any weapons you picked up off of the floor automatically reloaded. This had two implications on the game, the smaller of which was that it just made looting convenient. No longer did you have to worry about weapons that you picked up not being reloaded. But what players really liked about this bug was that it introduced a new form of skill expression into the game. If you were fast and knew how to efficiently navigate your inventory, you could quickly drop your guns and pick them back up to expedite reloads. This would allow you to reduce downtime in fights and maintain pressure on your opponents, and this bug stayed in the game for a long time, which made many players think that it might have actually been a feature. But in August of 2020, Epic would patch out the bug. Unlike the aforementioned bugs, the removal of the drop reload is pretty divisive within the community. Most pros generally liked the mechanic, but there was a good portion of the community that rejoiced at its removal as well. In retrospect, drop reload was definitely problematic with explosives and some SMGs, but in other ways it was a pleasant surprise, so hopefully Epic can revisit the bug one day and possibly implement a toned down form of it as a feature. The next removed bug was the Rift Shot, present in the game for about a month in early 2019. By spamming reload as you got rifted into the sky, you would be able to momentarily fire your weapon once you were teleported to the sky. Pros and competitive players generally like this bug, citing it as a really cool example of emergent gameplay. Another positive of this bug was that it provided much needed counterplay to the Rift-to-Go. One of the most annoying things that happened while the Rift-to-Go was in the game was fighting a player that had one. Oftentimes, if you had a player cornered on low HP, they would just use the rift while close to you in order to teleport both of you to the sky, and because you had to land first before being able to shoot them, they often got away or just prolonged the inevitable. This bug provided an effective yet difficult way to counter rifters, and it was even captured on the official broadcast during one of the World Cup qualifiers. However, a few weeks later in patch 9.3, Epic Games fixed the bug, which once again made the Rift-to-Gos really annoying to fight against. Now, most older Fortnite competitive players out there likely know about stretch resolution. While stretch res wasn't a bug, Epic didn't like its use and made it so changing your resolution didn't affect your FOV. However, in early 2020, a new method to get old school stretch resolution was discovered, and it was safe to say players were ecstatic. Having a high FOV is pretty standard among competitive players, but what stretch res was also great for was game performance. Many on lower end PCs could once again have a playable Fortnite experience with stretch res. I can attest to this myself, as back in early 2020 I played on a pretty low end laptop and being able to experience buttery smooth PC gameplay again was a treat. But just 4 days later, Epic patched out the method, forever sealing the fate of stretch resolution. The hate for this patch was almost unanimous. Many, including myself, enjoyed those few days of buttery smooth gameplay, while others in the community were mad about how Epic's priorities were in all of the wrong places, fixing bugs that players loved while leaving all the annoying ones in the game for months at a time. And on the topic of old bugs accidentally brought back in later updates was double pump. This isn't talking about the OG Fortnite double pump either. Most people know the story of double pump by now, that it was in the game in the early days and then forever patched out in Season 4. But in January of 2019, Epic Games accidentally reintroduced it. The bug allowed you to consecutively shoot 2 pump shotguns by reloading immediately after you shot each pump. If done correctly, you could once again double pump. It unfortunately only saw the light of day for all of 7 hours. Not only was this an example of Epic patching out skillful mechanics that players enjoyed, but it was a slap in the face to the thousands who were also begging Epic to fix the at the time rampant edit delay bug. Among early Fortnite bugs like double pump was fast farming. By binding an emote to a key and then cancelling it as soon as you swung your pickaxe, you could get double pickaxe swings on every non-consecutive input. Not only did the feature take a bit of skill to pull off, but it greatly expedited material farming, which many considered to be one of the most boring parts of Fortnite's gameplay loop, but not long after the bug was discovered, Epic patched it out. While it was justified, many players were still dissatisfied with the change, citing the game was a lot slower without it. But in a somewhat good twist, the merits of this bug would end up manifesting in later updates. The material farming rates were greatly increased in competitive modes a few months later, giving players some semblance of the old days of fast farming. So while fast farming was gone, it brought much needed change to the game. Finally are the bugs that equalize the playing field between higher ping and lower ping players. The majority of these bugs and exploits were box phasing exploits. Now, there have been a myriad of different kinds of phasing exploits in Fortnite's history, but here are the most notable. For a while from late 2022 to early 2023, existed a bug that allowed you to place builds through walls. It didn't really have a definitive name, but some called it the Vidil Classic due to its frequent use by pro player Vidil. By pushing up against the wall and positioning your crosshair at specific angles, you could place builds through walls. This was frequently used to catch players off guard since it was such an unexpected mechanic. Higher ping players especially loved this as it allowed them to pressure lower ping players without going for wall takes, but in January of 2023, Epic patched it out, much to the dismay of the community. While the bug seems broken on paper, some said it added to the skill of Fortnite. It is pretty standard technique to have a cone in your box in order to prevent others from placing builds in your own box, so in a way, this bug acted as a game sense check for players. Other examples include this phase exploit that guaranteed you to be able to shoot through walls, and this one that allowed you to guarantee phase through anyone's top. Most of these box phasing setups eventually got patched, which sparked genuine discussion about its place in the game, with some arguing that they were okay, because they were telegraphed and easily counterable, while others complained that they were bugs and shouldn't be in the game at the end of the day. If you enjoyed this video, then check out my second channel linked below, or the other videos on your screen now.